This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Riley Smith.
Good day and welcome to Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Riley Smith. Today is Thursday, January 29th of 2026. We're so glad you can join us for today's show. In today's episode, Dustin Hoffman will be joining to give an update with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig on the legislative session. We'll also have a check of the closing markets with Kaden Sweeney of agmarket.net. But first, let's take a peek at that conversation where Secretary Naig discusses some ag policy that has already been discussed, as well as some other legislation that's still on the table.
Now, also, the next subject I guess we can hit on is we talked right before the legislative session started about the Iowa Farm Act. And, of course, the legislature has been busy. A lot of things have already been talked about and voted on in a few chambers. Let's talk about where the Iowa Farm Act is and talk about some of the attention we're getting on other ag-related and bills that agriculture is really interested in.
Yeah, right. We know that, first of all, coming into session, as we talked about before, and we did talk before legislative session, didn't we? It hasn't been a month. It's only been a couple of weeks. We knew that property tax reform, property tax relief was going to be an issue, and improving private property rights as it relates to eminent domain were also going to be core topics, key topics that got discussed, and you've already seen action on those in that you've got bills that have been introduced. And look, this is a legislative process. You're going to see bills introduced. Then there'll be legislative work that gets done, and ultimately on both, I believe, there will be a compromise that'll be crafted between all the different versions of the bills that are out there, and that's how the process works. Certainly, the Farm Act is now introduced, and we're again excited about that. We did a lot of work in advance to brief folks on it, and it is the compilation of some big issues and some small issues, but shows the diversity of Iowa's agriculture, and that is now also working through the process. So that's where we are. It's the end of January, already a few weeks into session. We've got several months to go, and we're enjoying getting the opportunity to talk about and highlight these issues for folks. By the way, it's interesting. I'm now hearing from folks who are reaching out saying, "Hey, I remember talking to you about that issue and love seeing it now in a bill." And that was the whole point for us, was to take those things we learn as I'm traveling the state and visiting with folks, and put that into legislative form or policy form or rule form so that we can actually do something about the things that we're hearing and learning about as being opportunities or challenges for folks.
I don't know, one of the things that has been talked about a lot is that use of eminent domain and stuff like that with regards to the carbon pipeline. And that's a fine line that the legislature is going to have to walk, because obviously it looks to be a project that could do a lot to benefit the ethanol industry and benefit the agriculture industry in the state. But at the same time, you got to walk that fine line of making sure that people feel secure with their property and land rights.
Absolutely. And Iowans have sent a clear signal that they want to see further restrictions on eminent domain. And yet I hear from plenty of folks saying, we need to make sure that the law does accommodate for things that must go forward or things that need to go forward. Now, how do you do that? Well, so one, you should strengthen and limit and restrict how eminent domain can get used. It needs to be the last option. It needs to be the least desirable option. It needs to be costly, right? And landowners are owed and are required to have certain rights and protections in that process. And then there's a way to look at this and say, how can development happen in this state and be done in a way that frankly makes it so you don't have to use eminent domain? And so I know you've got kind of two different versions of the bill. One looks at the eminent domain side of it. One looks at the development side and the process side. And in the end, we need to make sure that we've got something that can be enshrined in Iowa law that will protect landowners and still allow for certain development to happen into the future. But this is a situation where that thumb needs to be firmly on the scale of the landowner, of the private property rights, in this state. And I think that's what you're going to see happen here.
Another thing I see under the list of legislative topics is getting farmer tax credits. You want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, this is something I appreciate that, Governor, that condition of the state speech is prime real estate, if you will. And she chose to take some of that time, that real estate, and talk about beginning farmer tax credits. And So here's something that's it's a good bad scenario, right? So one, we keep in this state lowering income taxes and eliminating income tax on retirement income. And for farmers, farmers typically don't have pensions and 401ks, but they have land, and so there's been a lot of work done to really drive down or eliminate the income tax that a retired farmer will pay. That has then resulted in the beginning farmer tax credit not being as desirable or as impactful as it maybe once had been. So really trying to look at how can we make that through refundability and other pieces, make that something that's more consequential and again can attract attention in a way that landowners, retired farmers will choose to rent to a beginning farmer, young beginning, that sort of thing. And so we're looking at that, but also just looking broadly at how do we reform beginning farmer programs at the federal level? What are we looking at the state level? Critically important that we make sure that the next generation has the opportunity and we can provide some incentives to help along the way.
And that again was Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. We always appreciate him for joining us. Thanks to Dustin for providing that segment as well. We'll go ahead and take a look at the closing markets, and I'm joined now by Kaden Sweeney of agmarket.net. Caden, what do we see going on in the grains today?
Yeah, kind of a quiet trade, really. Opened up pretty strong, kind of similar to yesterday, and really the case we've seen all week, where we have a pretty good overnight market as far as being stronger, and have a pretty good open at 8:30, and then kind of sell off shortly thereafter, and kind of chop throughout the day. So what we saw again today. Going to close corn up about a penny or so, maybe 2 cents. Beans down a penny on the new crop, about 3 cents on the old crop. But like I said, pretty quiet day overall. Once you kind of got past 9 o'clock or so, it's a pretty choppy trade, really.
And then with the weekly export sales, we're pretty much caught up to where the USDA would expect us to be at this point. So it really feels like the markets, like you said, they're kind of stagnating right now. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we've been building kind of a decent technical rally, so to speak, especially on the bean side. Like you said, not a lot of news, not a lot of fundamental news driving that, but just kind of starting to piece together a few decent days here and there. New crop beans got up to 10.98 today again. We're close to $11 again, and new crop corn up about 4.50 all week. So we certainly will take that, on the heels of January's WASDE report, just continuing to try to claw back what we lost there. But you're exactly right. Our exports are caught up. It's a little bit of a lull as far as fundamental news until something new comes out of the WASDE report next month or anything on E15, which it doesn't sound like we're going to be getting much right now. So like you said, fairly quiet right now. We're just kind of trade technicals, so to speak.
And then when we look at the livestock side of things, how do cattle and hogs trade?
Yeah, pretty quiet there too as well. Especially as far as what has been happening lately. It's weird doing a quiet day on cattle's is $1.50 move lower, on the fat cattle side, but that's kind of the environment we're on now. So that's where they're going to close feeders down about $1 and hogs down a little bit on February. April's up about 30 cents or so. So really quiet day overall. Trends for those three markets, in my opinion, still in place. We're still poking around, not quite making contract highs on the cattle after, we had a huge high and then a major sell-off last fall, but we're getting close to those levels again, to continuing to try to get that back as well. So again, nothing there really overly concerning to me as far as the livestock goes until, we're always a little bit leery of a screwworm headline, but until that happens, and that's an if, I think this market still looks pretty good for a while.
And I know those cattle on feed reports, we've got one coming tomorrow, but last week's really just didn't show too much either, and it kind of contributes to that lack of news. I mean, at this point, we're looking more at the weather in the livestock markets than we are in any reports, and I know the weather has been a little extreme, but it does feel like there's just really nothing much moving.
Yeah, I'm with you. Aside from, silver and gold, there's not a lot moving right now in the marketplace to speak of. So I'm with you. It's one of those deals, I think, whenever that happens, and this is a good time of year when you're just not getting a ton of news, a ton of fundamental news. Again, I kind of tend to start going back to technicals because these markets are going to trade every day. Somebody's got to find something to trade for or against. And a lot of times technicals or money flow is kind of the answer to that. So that's kind of where we like diving in a little bit deeper on the chart side of things and try to find some angles that maybe other people are looking at and things of that nature. But to your point, I think you're exactly right. It's just kind of a quiet time of year, can make it a little bit leery to trade. And that's why at the end of the day, we're here to protect risk. And that's what we've got to do.
All right, Caden, lots of great information today. For anyone who would like to talk markets with folks at agmarket.net, how can they do that?
Yeah, just go to our website, agmarket.net. You can get a hold of anyone from our staff there, including myself. Good time to be knocking down some 26 profitability stuff. And if you're out and about Commodity Classic end of February, be sure to stop by the booth there. It's gonna be a good time.
All right, Kaden, thanks again for your time as always, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate you as always.
That again was Kaden Sweeney of agmarket.net. We'll take a look at how the numbers close through the market window at iowaagnet.com. At the close, March corn down 2 1/4 at 428 1/4. March soybeans down 6 even at 1061 3/4. March soybean meal down 560 at 294.30. March soybean oil down 10 cents at 53.89. Chicago wheat down 7 even at 522 1/2. Kansas City hard red winter wheat down 11 even at 529 3/4. Minneapolis spring wheat down 5 1/4 at 569 3/4. March oats up 2 even at 299 1/4. On the Merc, February live cattle up $1.12 at 236.02. March feeders up 242 at 362.60. February lean hogs down 5 cents at 88.30. February pork cutout up 40 at 97.82. And February class 3 milk up 75 at 16.03. That's been a check of the markets on Ag Matters PM, and that also brings us to the end of today's show. You can find all of our daily ag news content on our website at iowaagnet.com. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Riley Smith. On behalf of Dustin Huffman and Mark Magnuson, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.